Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Lucid. I'm going to be doing a new Let's Play with the nation LA-Ulm. So that is Late Age Ulm. It is a very strong nation. It's an extremely strong blood power. It has access to Blood Astral. And it has access to a unique and very strong Blood Summon, which is available without any research, the Vampire Count. So in this first episode, we're going to go through the national overview. I'm going to go ahead and load up just a test game real quick where I have my troops. So we're going to talk really quick about the troops you get. I'm going to pull up the national overview here. So it's a nation with very well armored, good vanilla troops. Though they're not excellent, they are good. You can definitely expand with them. They get a villain who is a stealthy, undisciplined, basically raider. He has a mace which does a good deal of damage and a short bow. It's only 10 gold. And then okay stats, 9 attack and defense with 5 protection. So not a bad troop. Definitely pretty good for raiding, depending on who you're fighting. Short bows aren't as great in the late age, just because a lot of units have more armor, which short bows don't do much damage at all against. But they do have a mace once they get in combat, so they're kind of okay. These are your crappy troops, and your crappy troops aren't really that crappy. You've got the Pikeneer, who has low defense, okay to good protection, a length 5 pike. So if you're fighting people with really bad morale and short length weapons, they're pretty good. So like animals especially, Pikeneers are really good against. Also things that wield daggers and stuff like that. So not a bad troop. Their defense is low, but they're going to get a fair amount of repels, and then they have okay protection for when they do get hit. These are pretty good against indies. These are less good against indies, except maybe heavy cav and things like that, which have more armor. They have a higher damage attack, 23. I think the other one is 19. Basically the same kind of protection. And then you have the Infantry of Ulm. These are the same protection. They have a Morning Star, which is better against shields. You get 2 additional attacks, so 13 attack against the shield. And they have shields to them, so these are your best arrow catchers. Yeah, they're only 10 gold. They're pretty good for 10 gold. But they're not excellent. But they're, in terms of arrow catchers, you're not going to find troops that are much better than this. In terms of gold efficiency, kind of arrow catching meat shields. And then we're on to the Ranger of Ulm. The Ranger of Ulm is a pretty good unit. It has a crossbow with 2 additional precision, which is a good precision buff on top of 12 base precision, so they're very high precision crossbows. And they have an axe, which is important. So these guys do as much damage as your Pikeneers in melee combat. It's not length 5, but I mean, this is a high damage melee weapon with 10 attack. You can't really complain about that. These guys are going to do a lot of damage in melee. Unfortunately, though, they don't have much armor, so they have 7 protection, which is not great. And they don't have great defense, but they're going to do a fair amount of damage with their crossbows, and then once things ever close with them in melee, they will definitely dish out some damage, though they will also take high attrition. So while you want to avoid these guys getting in melee combat if possible, you're not really scared of it. Right? It's more like you just don't want to have as much attrition. So these are a very good unit. Importantly, they're stealthy, so you can raid with them. And as raiders, they're very good because they will shoot, with about 40 of them, they'll shoot a lot of crossbows, enough to kill most PD without engaging in melee. And then if anything runs into melee with them, they will chop them up with axes. So they're good raiders. You don't really want to, you have to be careful. You have to know what you're fighting. So you don't want to waste 40 of these because they're kind of expensive at 12 gold a pop, but they're definitely good raiders. And they're good, as with all crossbows, once you get a critical mass of them. So once you have like 100 of them, they're pretty damn good at chewing up enemy ranks. You don't have a lot of other things with this nation that you would need to easily make the crossbows really strong. Like you don't have access to flaming arrows or wind guide or anything like that, but yeah, they're definitely solid. Next, we have the Zweihander, which is a very resource-intensive, 36 resources, 14 gold. But it's a great unit. Very low magic resistance, but excellent protection and excellent damage. So this will do a lot of damage versus high high armor troops, which you'll be fighting a lot of in LA, and they have very, very high protection. 21 is near the point where you don't take damage from shitty troops. Like you just, like 24, 26 is the range where you just don't take damage from normal troops, which includes PD. 21 you'll take some, but not that much, and you have pretty good base stats, like 13 HP is pretty good. So these guys, they will take damage from crossbow fire, because this will only count for half, and then yeah, you'll take damage from crossbow fire basically. So you kind of don't want them to do that, but then you kind of don't care. If you can get any kind of buffs on these guys, Marble Warriors especially, they become very, very difficult to damage. Yeah. Like, Marble Warriors will get them up to like 30 plus protection, like around 30 protection. So having 14 gold units with 30 protection that deal 22 damage is not bad at all. And you'll have access to blood, so you could potentially give them Rush of Strength, though they do have just extremely weak magic resistance, though you do have access to anti-magic. But anti-magic is only going to get you up to a modest 13. So things that do an MR check will wreck these guys. You have the Ghoul Guardian. This is a niche unit. So the last two units we have are very niche. This is Undead with very low, or rather low magic resistance. So it will fall to banishment spam and things like that. And it's not expensive, but it's not cheap. 20 gold, high resources, but you get this awesome weapon, the Black Halberd, which does a ton of magic damage. So if you're fighting Lemuria, because it's late age, so that's a thing, you want this. If you're fighting any of the air thug nations, like Midgard, any of those who are going to be putting up mist form, this will pop right through those. And then they have 22 protection. Right? They're ridiculously strong in melee combat. And importantly, the Black Halberd, you get a fatigue attack, which is area of effect 1. And this will trigger. This isn't an effect that triggers only on damage, I don't think. I haven't really tested it, so don't hold me to it, but it will do, every time you swing, a 1 area of effect 15 damage, and you can fit 3 of these guys in a square, so you're going to be doing like 45 fatigue damage a turn to a whole square, so 2 turns of attacking and they're knocked out. That's pretty good. These guys will just crush elite sacreds. Like, you have a centaur rush, you have a van rush, whatever sacred rush you're dealing with, these guys will kind of wreck their shit. Though they are vulnerable to banishment. But if people are doing a sacred rush, they're not really going to be bringing masses of priests. So anyway, this is not like a hunt dozens of these, right? But these are situationally very useful. Then we have the Black Templar. These guys have the highest protection of all your units. 23 with 5 encumbrance. And then they have pretty high damage attacks. You have a lance, which is 19, 1 use only. Then you have a Morningstar and a hoof. Morningstar is extra good versus shields, so it's 13 attack, but 15 against shields, which there's a lot of shields in late age, so they definitely do a fair amount of damage. They're expensive, though. They're kind of overpriced, and they're sacred, so this is probably not a unit you're going to spam. Like, for this much gold, you can have 65 gold. You could have 7 almost. 6.5 Zweihanders. And 6.5 Zweihanders will just wreck a Black Templar. No, these guys are going to cost way more resources, but You could do a bless strategy around them. I think it would be pretty weak. So you basically have a situational unit who's going to be good at flanking and who is sacred. We'll get into the bless that kind of I recommend, but you can pick up a situationally useful bless that will give these guys a niche use at taking out super combatants and things like that, and flanking archers. But yeah, you have these guys. These two are cap only. Everybody else you have is recruit anywhere, and that's kind of the thing with Ulm is they're a recruit anywhere nation, and that we'll talk about this in Pretender design, but that does lead you more towards scales. We have a ranger captain, and this is basically a 40 leadership dude who's stealthy, and he has a crossbow. So the crossbow is nice because as a leader he won't run into combat or get close to his troops where he could get hit. He'll sit in the back and shoot it, which is nice. Stealthy is nice because it can lead your wolves and your wolves and your rangers. And yeah, it's basically a good leader. You don't have scouts, so this year only... Well, you have this as a scout, and you have spies, who are actually like super scouts. But we'll get to these guys in a minute. Then you have a commander. 70 gold for 80 leadership is not bad. Pretty durable with the tower shield and then this armor, so he's unlikely to get the rogue arrow pick-off by archers. So all in all, a very good, efficient 80 leadership commander. Not too many bells and whistles. You have your first priest. So he's 45 gold, cheaper than most priests, and plus he's an inquisitor. All the priests for your nation are inquisitors, which means they're twice as effective at preaching down enemy dominion. And this is something which you can play the nation well and never use, but this is a great trait. It gives you excellent control of dominion. It's very, very easy to kick enemy dominion out of territory once you've conquered it, or if it's pushing into yours. You'll have no trouble preaching it down. I tend not to recruit these guys because you will have a lot of their big brothers, the Black Priests. Okay, so now we have the two mages that you can get outside of your fort walls. You can get them in any province with a lab in it. One is the illuminated one. And just as an Astral 1 mage, it's a little expensive. 75 gold is a little high for Astral 1 only. And it's not super high research paths, but it's stealthy. And it's a spy, right? So you can think of a few things off the bat. One is, well, spying is just good in general. Gives you good information on exactly what troops are there, what sites are in a province, things like that. You can throw a black heart on them. They can become decent assassins with the astral cross path, or with the astral path. Yeah, these are good units. Their big brother is the member of the second tier. Astral 2, Blood 1. They have a 10% chance of getting these. If you make as many of these as you probably should, you'll get a few of these cross paths. Though none of these are reliable. Like, you probably won't get one of each of them in every game. If you make a fair amount of them, you'll probably get 3 out of the 4, and a couple on one of them. But the particularly useful ones are the astral ones, because that will be your highest astral path. You'll get some astral 3. Blood Fire is a useful cross path. Astral Fire is kind of nice. You can do Solar Eclipse. Death Blood potentially gives you access to vampires if you haven't taken that on your Pretender. And then the Blood is nice. It will make some of the Astral Blood stuff easier to cast, and it'll be slightly better at blood hunting. The Astral Blood stuff, of course, is like the horror spam type of things. So, yeah, these guys are really good. You can recruit them in any province with a lab. These got a nerf coming from Dominions 4 to Dominions 5. And that is because you used to be able to get one of these per turn in any province with a lab, and now you can only get one every other turn. So they're basically slow to recruit now in non-fort provinces. But if you have a couple labs up in maybe places where you're intending to blood hunt, they can give you a little early research boost. To get the full fort up, it's going to cost you 6 plus 900 gold in addition to the lab. So you're basically saving 900 gold to make this slow to recruit, and yeah, totally is worth it. This is the star of the show. This guy is very similar to like LA-Ulm, middle-aged Ulm. who gets a very similar unit, but it's cap only. And this is very, very close to that unit, except you can get them anywhere. They're Earth and Holy, which means they can cast Iron Blizzards, which is so strong. It's such a strong spell. They get a Fire, Air, Earth, or Astral random, and these each have different uses. The Earth ones are going to be your best ones at spamming Iron Wizard. at spamming Iron Blizzard. The Air ones are going to give you access to a few Air-Earth crosspath items, like Dancing Shield. And these guys can also cast Aim before they do Iron Blizzard. The Fire ones, Fire Earth is a good crosspath. It gives you a few items you can forge. And it gives you Magma Eruption. The Magma Eruption's harder to cast in Dom 5. You basically are going to need a Fire Booster or have them part of a Communion. And Astral allows these guys to get in Communions, which your nation can definitely do Communions easily, and so being able to put Earth Power onto Communion slaves is quite nice. They're Holy too, and that combined with Inquisitor means they act like a Holy 4 priests when they're trying to preach down enemy dominion. As I mentioned, they are recruit outside of your capital, so you can get them in every province with a fort, so you can mass them, which means lots and lots and lots of Iron Blizzard. And then, as if that is not enough to make this guy worthy of recruiting as much as you can, you have a Forge bonus. So what this means is you get a gem reduced from the item cost of every item. So if you have a 5 gem item, you can put a hammer on it and make it for 2. If you didn't know, that is freaking awesome. So yeah, these guys are super duper good. Super duper good. You're going to want lots and lots of these. These are what make this nation really strong in the mid game. Then we have the Wolf Herd. This is a capital only dude. And he's good at leading wolves. And he summons, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3. I think it's 2. I think he summons 2 wolves a turn. This guy got changed a bit from 4 to 5. He's now 1 commander point, so you can get 3 of them in your capital per turn, which means you can amass tons of wolves very quickly, whereas before, it would take you kind of a long time to get a good wolf factory set up, and you're basically dedicating your castle to it, your first fort to it, and you have to do that for a long time to get enough to spam these guys out. Now you can do it early game, like where you have lots of wolves coming out very, very quickly. And they're good as archer screens, they're good as raiders, they're good as patrollers. So it seems like a buff. However, wolves can no longer hold up fortress walls terribly easy. I'll show you the stats on them real quick. If you look at them, if you click on strength, it will pull this up and you can see what their siege strength is. So their siege strength, they're good at breaking down walls, 8 siege strength, but their defense is really low. I'm not sure, it's either, this is rounding it, I don't know how the rounding works. I think it's just this is what's being displayed. I think when you actually add it up, it's either 0.08 or it's 0.04. So most units have half of the siege strength, and I can look this up afterwards maybe, but most units have half of their siege strength as their siege defense, so it should be like 0.4. But wolves, because they're animals, and because people were using them to defend forts, which doesn't really make much sense. Wolves can't really repair walls. They nerfed the defense. So animals are very bad at repairing walls. They get either a 5th or a 10th of the siege defense of everyone else. So you don't want to use wolves to defend. What you want to use to defend now are your thralls, which are not bad at it. Right? They get 0.6, which is kind of more than your average Joe. So in Dominions 4, I would use my thralls mostly for patrolling, and I would like to do that because I could put them on guard commander while my mages and PD did most of the work, and I wouldn't lose a lot of them. The wolves, if you get raided, they'll run forward. So I preferred these guys, and I would use wolves to hold up forts. In Dominions 5 now, you want to use these guys defensively to hold up fort walls, and you want to use your wolves to patrol. And you'll have a lot of wolves die when you get raided, but you will replenish them because you are LA-Ulm and you have lots and lots of free wolves. We'll go through the rest of the national overview. So you get these guys, you can get 3 a turn, you get tons of wolves. You have these guys, I've never recruited one. They do have Undead Leadership, so they are, and they only cost 1 recruitment point. So you could get 240 Undead Leadership a turn if you recruit this in your main fort, which you're not going to have vampires in the same way, like especially the summonable vampires the same way you would in a normal game, but of Dominions 4. So you don't really need the Undead Leadership, but hey, you have it. You will need Undead Leadership, of course, to move these guys around, but yeah. Whoops. And then we have the Meister, who is a Holy One. Dude, if you went with the Bless, because you're a little, you're feeling a little spicy, you can use this guy. He could potentially thug, especially if you can take care of his encumbrance issues. If you give him Blood Surge and then Reinvigoration and maybe like Regeneration, this guy could definitely thug. But kind of low magic resistance, so he would be vulnerable to some of the astral anti-thug stuff. But he has pretty phenomenal protection coming right out of the gate, and for not very much money, and you could get 3 of them a turn, right? So, I mean, you could imagine, like if you went with that as an Awake Bless, and you imagine recruiting 3 of these guys every turn, and let's say one of them can take an easy province, and 2 of them can take a hard province. Yeah, it's going to be nuts. One thing is these guys do have kind of shitty defenses, the same for the unit, not just the commander. So they're going to be getting hit a lot, but they have really high protection, especially when you factor in the shield. And then finally, this is our last of the cap-only units, is the Fortune Teller. She has 15 fortune telling, so makes misfortune a little more palatable if you put these Fortune Tellers in your big cities. It'll prevent some of the bad events on your high-impact provinces. So it's Astral 1 with these cross paths. So if you get Astral 2, it's not noteworthy. You already have Astral 2. Astral Death, this is your only death access in your recruitable units. So if you don't get Blood Astral on your Pretender, this is going to be the most reliable way to get vampires. You have to get this lady, you have to empower her again in Death. Then you have to forge a Skull Staff, and then you have to empower her in Blood 3 times. So that is a lot of hoops to jump through, but it's your only death access, and you'll use your death ones to do Dark Knowledge to site search for death. Nature, it's also your only nature access. So if you get this lady, you will have a nature Astral Mage, which is good. It can break you into nature. The Moonvine Bracelet is also Nature 3 Astral 1, so it's a good way to forge that booster. And then the Blood ones are not terribly noteworthy. You may use them for early blood hunting if you get a Blood one early in the game, because you will be recruiting some of these in your capital. But yeah, it's kind of an odd nation, because all your really good stuff, like these guys and these guys, you can get anywhere. But then like this one, who's not really much to write home about, she's capital only. And then your wolf herds, who they're kind of cool, but they're not in and of themselves that powerful. These are like your cap only units. So your cap only stuff is not super special, but it is useful. So you'll spend your cap only, you'll spend your capital turns getting like cheap, not super special stuff, but that is useful, while you're getting your stronger units in all of your other provinces, which is a little backwards to how most nations play. But anyway, that's this nation. So we've talked about all of the recruitable units. I'm going to talk real quickly about vampires, because this is a vampire superpower. The reason it's a vampire superpower is because at Blood 0, I've got everything researched here, but when you start off the game, you will start with Sanguine Heritage researched, and it's Blood 3, Death 3. And as I mentioned, you don't have any way to cast this with any of your recruitable mages. So you'll often want to put these paths on your Pretender so that you can cast it. But if you cast it, it's 44 Blood Slaves, and it will give you one of these guys. These are like the Vampire Lords, which everybody can get, but it's a Vampire count. They have Invulnerability 25, Death 2, Blood 2. They're going to be your best Blood Hunters. And they are going to get your blood economy going like crazy. You are going to have the strongest blood economy in LA once you get these guys cranked out. Yeah, they're such good blood hunters. Why they're so good is because not only do they have blood, but they have death. Death is really good when you're defending provinces against against raiding. So one of the things, if you're blood hunting, you have to be really vigilant about countering raids, because people will come raid you, and they can kill your blood hunters when they're raiding, in addition to taking your province. And usually you have more PD in provinces that you're blood hunting to reduce unrest. So you don't want those provinces to fall to heavy raiding, and these guys are really good against heavy raiding. They can do Horde of Skeletons, and then Reinvigoration, and more Horde of Skeletons, and then attack. And these are strong dudes, so that's going to do a lot of damage. They're not as good a leaders as your Vampire Lords, who... Do I have one here? I don't have a Vampire Lord. Let's cast a Vampire Lord real quick. Curse of Blood. Let's see what we've got here. So this is a Vampire Lord. It's 77 Blood Slaves for this guy. These changed a lot coming from Dominions 4 to Dominions 5. In Dominions 4, you could have them, you'd hit space, and then there would be an option to summon allies, and that would get you more vampires. So every turn you get one of these, you can have these guys just turn into little vampire factories, and they just manufacture one vampire a turn, and it's just exponential growth. So they got very, very uncontrollably strong. So they've been nerfed. Now, instead, these guys generate thralls just like your counts. And they're almost twice as expensive. So these guys are kind of better. These are better for fighting in combat. Like if you're going to lead an army, these guys can cast Darkness. They're better at dropping some of the big blood spells. So you'll want these guys as leaders. Their path... The path to cast them is a bit higher. You need one more death. So you can, once you have Sanguine Heritage, kit these guys out to summon Vampire Lords. You have to give them a helmet, which if you need good death access, right? A Skull Staff and then a blood item, and then they can do it. But yeah, these guys are pretty good. If you want to get vampires now, because you can't get them by the little vampire factoring out of the Vampire Lord, you have to cast Bloodrite. I'll go ahead and do that real quick. Bloodrite gives you a vampire, one vampire, and it takes a whole mage turn, and it costs 11 blood slaves. Right, so you can make a lot of vampires now, and you can do it with your counts. You don't need a Vampire Lord. But really? Like 11 blood slaves and a whole turn? I mean, for 4 of these, you can get one of these guys, and I would rather have one of these than 4 vampires. So I think the days of having vampires, like these guys, which used to be what you feared when you were fighting Ulm, would be 100 or 200 of these guys descending on your fort and popping it in one turn and then jumping in and eating you. Those days are over. You're not. It's just they're too expensive. Too expensive in terms of mage turns. Yeah, you're not going to do it. The other thing we have to talk about when we're talking about vampires now is immortality. Immortality changed. It used to be in your dominion. If you died in your dominion, you would respawn immediately in your capital. That's different now. I think it got improved. Most units now have immortality like 3 months, so 1 month is kind of rare. But let's talk about what it does. It used to be, as I said, it was only in friendly dominions, so the way you would play the nation is very defensively. You would not use your immortal units to go out and attack because, they're expensive because they're immortal. Because they're immortal, they cost more. And you don't want to use them where you're not going to, reap the benefit that you paid all this money for, which is the fact that they're immortal. So what you would do is you'd be very, very conservative using your immortal units, which if you think about it is kind of silly. Like, if they're immortal, they're not afraid of death and they're running around rampaging all the time. So I like the change where they made it so that it is like that. So because they are immortal, they will run off and actually use it a lot. For a lot of the immortal units where it's 3 months, there's a big penalty when you die. So, you don't sit defensively in your own dominion, but you kind of don't want them to die because it's going to take them 3 months to respawn, which is a long time. But these guys respawn immediately, so that's pretty awesome. So, if you think about how the nation changes from the vampire perspective, and I hope they balance it out. What they need to do is they need to go in and take a blood right, wherever the hell this is. They need to take blood right, and this is too expensive. They need to make it like 18 blood slaves for 2 vampires. And then I think it would be a real question. Okay, do I spend a mage turn getting 2 vampires, or do I summon a vampire count or a vampire lord? Because right now, if you have access to vampire lords or counts, you would never get the base unit, the mage. I mean, just the troop. I mean, there's no reason to. So hopefully they change it, but now it plays differently. It's basically going to be a bunch of these guys running around with packs of thralls and other sorts of troops and doing lots of horde skeletons and things like that. So that's the nation. They are, if you go scales, they're going to be kind of middling or early game. They won't expand super fast unless you go for some funny bless strategy, or you have an awake god, which you probably do both of those. I mean, if you do an awake god, the god will probably have some kind of bless, which these guys might be able to use, and you could come up with something cheesy where these guys expand really fast. I'm sure you could do it. And I'll talk about that. I have a couple ideas for that for my next video, but where we talk about pretender design. I don't really like that. I think you have really good base troops, and every time you take a bless, you're effectively making your non-bless troops more expensive because you're going to have less income. Though, if you get way more provinces at the beginning, it's fine. The thing with this nation, though, is you don't want to get too big, because just being LA-Ulm, which is well known to kind of be a very powerful nation, you're going to have a target on your head. So if you get too big, people are going to gang up on you. If you're small or medium size and well defended, that's not the kind of... people don't look to attack those nations. And they're definitely not going to gang up on them. So at worst, you're probably going to be, 1v1 against maybe a slightly bigger nation who thinks you look tasty. But yeah, So I don't know if you really want to go like a strategy to get really big early. But you have good troops. Once you get your cap ring cleared, you can have hordes of crossbowmen who may be good, depending on who you're fighting or who your neighbors are. And then once you have a few forts up, you're going to have pretty good... because these guys are super resource intensive, but you can get a lot of Zweihanders. And these guys are pretty good all around, especially when backed up by crossbows or other things. So your early game is kind of weak. You'll be able to expand okay, but not great. Maybe 15 provinces year one. Your mid game is early mid game is pretty strong because it's early mid game. Mages really haven't come out yet, and you have really good base troops, so you're set up well there. And then you have this guy to counter SC rushes, and you have this guy to counter sacred rushes. So you've got really good base troops. You don't need a heavy bless. But you could do it to do some cheese with this guy, or cheese here. But And then late mid-game is when your blood economy is going to start coming online and you'll start getting vampire counts. Or that'll actually start coming out like mid-game. And then late mid-game, you'll have a lot of them. And then early late game, you will have just hordes of thralls everywhere, patrolling everything, tons of wolves everywhere. You'll be the most well-defended nation in the game. It'll be so hard to attack you. You'll have a huge blood economy, and you can do with that what you want. So this is a nation that's got very good base troops. You have very low magic path diversity, though you do have important paths, like you have Death, Blood, and Astral, which are the best late game paths in the game, by the way. With tiny access, with some Earth access, and then tiny access to other things. And you have a Forge bonus guy, which means all sorts of good stuff. So, I will just, having this guy does actually make this thug strategy viable, because any crappy 5 gem item you would want to put on him that you can think would make this guy an efficient thug, if with the right bless, you could do that. But yeah, this is one of the strongest late game powers. They're fun. I'm looking forward to see how this nation plays out in Dominions 5. In Dominions 4, I was actually going to do a Let's Play with them. I had started a game. It was a really, really fun game. I had a lot of fun in it. I almost lost early game when I got raided by Zabalba. We all had to gang up on him because he was really big. We beat him back, and then there was all sorts of interesting diplomacy, and then I ended up being in a war with Ryla and Joman. And it was a ton of fun. I had a lot of fun in that game. I was going to put it up, but Dominions 5 came out, and rather than put up a Dominions 4 game, I figured it would be better to go ahead and try this nation again in Dominions 5 since so much changed for it. So at the time of this recording, I'm about 20 turns into the game. So hopefully we'll get caught up quickly. I'm going to try to go ahead and get caught up and then give you guys play-by-plays as the game goes on, though of course I won't upload it till the game is almost finished, so I don't give away any of my strategies or thoughts or anything about my neighbors. So thanks everyone for watching, and I'm really looking forward to doing this Let's Play, and I hope you are looking forward to watching it. Thanks.